911 for what city?
Calgary.
Do you need fire, police, or ambulance?
Ambulance. My daughter fell down the stairs, and she's not there. She's not conscious.
Okay, I have help on the way. Just stay on the line. How old is she?
She's 6.
6? Is she awake?
No.
Pardon?
No.
No? Is she breathing?
No, I don't think so.
Some stories are difficult to hear, not because they are complicated, but because they are real. This is one of those stories. It begins in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and it centers around a 6-year-old girl named Meika Jordan, a child whose life ended long before it should have, a child who depended on the adults around her for safety and did not receive it. November 13th, 2011. Emergency services in Calgary received a call. A woman's voice on the line was urgent, asking for help. When paramedics arrived, they found Meika Jordan unconscious and not breathing. She was rushed to the hospital. Doctors worked for hours, doing everything possible to save her. For 16 hours, medical teams attempted to stabilize her condition. But on November 14th, 2011, at 1:47 p.m., Meika Jordan was pronounced dead. She was 6 years old. What happened to her would become the center of a long and painful investigation, one that would take years to fully resolve, one that would force her family to fight for answers, and one that would eventually lead to broader questions about how child protection systems respond when warning signs are missed. To understand what was lost, it is important to understand who Meika was. Meika Jordan was born on December 11, 2004, in Calgary. She was the daughter of Kyla Jordan and Spencer Jordan. At the time of her death, she was just under 4 feet tall and weighed approximately 46 pounds. But those details only describe her physically. They do not describe the child she was. Those who knew Meika consistently described the same things. She was energetic, cheerful, resilient in ways that stood out, even for a young child. She loved to sing, dance, and ride her skateboard. Her presence had a noticeable effect on people around her. She brought light into a room without trying. Family members remembered her as someone who rarely stayed upset for long. If she fell while playing, she would stand up, brush herself off, and continue as if nothing had happened. Not because she didn't feel pain, but because she chose to move forward quickly. That resilience became part of how people remembered her. One small detail about Meika stayed with those who loved her. She collected ladybugs. She would gently place them into a jar, keep them for a short time, and then release them. When asked why, she gave a simple explanation. She said that ladybugs missed their families too. It was a small comment, but it revealed something important about her. She understood connection. She understood care, even at 6 years old. She was the kind of child who could find something positive in almost any situation. If plans were canceled, she didn't dwell on disappointment. If it rained, she didn't stay inside. She ran outside, jumped in puddles, and turned the moment into something fun. Her smile, according to those who knew her, was constant. Looking at her photos now, it is difficult to reconcile that image with what would eventually happen. A child full of life. A child surrounded by family. A child who should have had years ahead of her. Meika's family life, however, was not simple. Her parents, Kyla and Spencer Jordan, had a relationship marked by frequent conflict. Despite that, in 2006, they had a second child together, a son named Lee. But the relationship did not stabilize. It deteriorated, and by 2009, the couple divorced. What followed was a familiar but often difficult process. A custody dispute. Both parents wanted their children to live with them. Eventually, the court established a shared custody arrangement. Meika and her younger brother would divide their time between both households. Since both parents lived in Calgary, the arrangement was considered manageable. For a time, it appeared to function. Life moved forward. 2 years passed. Both parents began new relationships. Kyla married a man named Brian Woodhouse. Spencer began living with a new partner, Marie Magoon. From the outside, it appeared that both households were forming new versions of stability. But as later events would show, stability on the surface does not always reflect what is happening beneath it. And in cases like this, the difference between those two realities can become critical. At the time of Meika's death, Marie Magoon was living with her father, Spencer Jordan, as his common-law partner. Under the custody arrangement, Meika and her younger brother continued moving between both households, time with their mother, Kyla, and stepfather Brian Woodhouse, and time with their father and Marie. By 2011, Kyla and Brian were expecting another child, and their home environment appeared stable and engaged. Family members later described that Meika and her brother were sometimes energetic and difficult to manage, as many young children are. But they responded well to guidance and structure. In contrast, interactions at Spencer's home were described differently. When Meika stayed with her father, she sometimes became more reactive, making faces, refusing instructions, or testing boundaries. To adults unfamiliar with child behavior, this could appear as defiance. But in most cases, it reflects normal developmental behavior, especially in children navigating two households and inconsistent environments. For Marie Magoon, who had no prior experience raising children, those behaviors reportedly became a source of frustration. In the weeks leading up to November 2011, concerns had already begun to surface. Kyla and Brian contacted Alberta Child and Family Services, reporting that Meika had returned from visits with injuries to her body. The report was made. It was documented, but no immediate intervention followed. At that moment, the situation did not appear severe enough to trigger urgent removal or investigation. In hindsight, it became one of several missed opportunities. Thursday, November 10, 2011, marked the beginning of the final sequence of events. On that day, Meika sustained an injury to her hand. The injury was serious enough that it required medical attention. But instead of taking her to a doctor, the adults in the home made a different decision. They chose not to seek professional care. Instead, evidence later showed that online searches were made for ways to treat the injury without medical involvement, an attempt to manage the situation privately. Late on Friday night, November 11th, shortly before midnight, Marie Magoon contacted HealthLink, a medical advice service. During that call, information provided was incomplete. Key details about the injury were not fully disclosed. At the same time, another issue emerged. According to the custody agreement, Meika and her brother were scheduled to return to their mother on Saturday. That would have meant Kyla seeing Meika's condition. Instead, Spencer contacted Kyla with a request. He asked to extend the children's stay, offering an explanation unrelated to Meika's injury. Marie reinforced the same explanation in her own message. Kyla agreed, first to a short extension. Then, the return date was pushed further. Eventually, the children remained at Spencer's home until November 15th. Over the course of that weekend, Meika's condition continued to decline. On Friday evening, she was already showing signs of fatigue. She appeared unwell, weak. By Saturday, those symptoms became more noticeable. She was increasingly tired and less active than usual. By Sunday, the situation had deteriorated further. Meika was visibly weak. She was struggling. Her behavior reflected distress, physical and emotional. At that stage, a child in that condition required medical evaluation, but no emergency care was sought. On Sunday, November 13th, 2011, the situation reached a critical point. That morning, Spencer remained at home. At approximately 7:18 p.m., emergency services were finally contacted. The delay between the onset F symptoms and the emergency call would later become a central issue in the case. When paramedics arrived at the residence, they found Meika Jordan unresponsive, located at the bottom of a carpeted staircase. Her condition was critical. Emergency responders began immediate life-saving measures at the scene before transporting her to the hospital. From the outside, this moment appeared sudden, an emergency, a collapse. But medical findings would later suggest that what happened that evening was not an isolated event. It was the result of a progression that had developed over time. In cases like this, one of the most difficult questions is not what happened in the final minutes, but what happened in the hours, days, and weeks before. What signs were visible? Who saw them? And why they did not lead to intervention in time. At the hospital, Dr. Guilfoyle and the medical team began a full examination. A CT scan was performed. The results immediately raised concern. The injuries did not match the explanation that had been given. This was not consistent with a single fall. It was not consistent with a sudden accident. Medical findings indicated that what had happened to Meika developed over a period of time. Despite continued efforts by doctors, her condition did not improve. On November 14, 2011, at 1:47 p.m., Meika Jordan was pronounced dead. She was 6 years old. Following her death, a police investigation began. Officers interviewed Spencer Jordan and Marie Magoon. Both maintained the same explanation. They described the situation as an accident, a fall, an isolated incident. But the medical evidence did not support that version. Investigators attempted to speak with Meika's younger brother, but the child was unable to provide useful information. He was frightened, too overwhelmed to communicate clearly. At that stage, the case stalled. There was suspicion. There were inconsistencies. But there was not yet enough evidence to fully establish what had happened inside that home. During Meika's funeral, observers noted something that stood out. Family members expressed visible grief. Her stepfather, Brian Woodhouse, openly showed emotion. But her biological father, Spencer Jordan, appeared distant. The contrast did not go unnoticed. Nearly a year later, investigators turned to a different strategy. A tactic known in Canada as a Mr. Big operation. Undercover officers posed as members of a criminal organization. Their goal was to build trust with the suspects over time. The operation was large in scale. More than 150 officers were involved. It was given the name SASH, Safe and Sound in Heaven.
The Calgary Police Service continues to investigate the death of a 6-year-old girl in the Northeast and are releasing new information to the public. On Sunday, November 13th, 2011, at approximately 7:15 p.m., Calgary police were called to the 6700 block of Temple Drive, Northeast, for reports of a 6-year-old girl with undetermined injuries sustained in her home. Police were originally told by family members that the girl had fallen down a flight of stairs. The victim, Meika Dawn Jordan, died in hospital on Monday, November 14th, 2011, and an autopsy was completed on Wednesday, November 16th, 2011. The autopsy concluded that she died as a result of blunt force trauma, and the death was declared a homicide. Police can now reveal that the blunt force trauma injuries sustained by Meika were to her head and abdomen. They are not consistent with a fall down the flight of stairs. Investigators have received new medical evidence that provides information regarding the timing of Meika's injuries and when the injuries were sustained. Police also believe Meika may have received other injuries prior to her death. This includes a severe third-degree burn that covered the palm of Meika's hand and fingers. This new evidence shows that at the time Meika received the burn injury and when she received the blunt force trauma injuries, she was in sole care of her biological father and her stepmother. They continue to not cooperate with the investigation. Given the new medical evidence that has come to light, investigators are confident that they will be able to move the investigation forward. I'll now take your questions.
Are you officially naming bio father and stepmother as suspects now?
They are suspects in this investigation, and they have been since early in the investigation.
Can you talk more about her injuries, like, at all? I know besides blunt force trauma, like, Just to kind
Without
of...
going into detail to protect the integrity of the investigation, I can say that there are blunt force trauma injuries to the head and abdomen.
Can you say how long of a time frame between the blunt force trauma injuries and the burn injuries? What's the time period between those?
We do have an indication of the time period, but to protect the integrity of the investigation, I can't release it at this time. But as part of the investigation, we look at who had exclusive opportunity during the time these injuries were inflicted. And we believe that both the biological father and the stepmother had exclusive opportunity to the child.
I know you can't say a specific time, but can you say whether it was days or hours or months or?
I can't get into specifics in regards to the timeline.
Do you guys believe that there was ongoing abuse?
We believe that there were other injuries inflicted on the child during the period when she was with both the biological father and the stepmother.
So over one weekend?
I can't provide a timeline. Protect the integrity of the investigation.
Other injuries aside from the blunt force injuries and the burn injuries?
There were other injuries involved as well. I can't go into detail.
Can you say what you think that caused the burn? Like, does it appear like a stove burn?
We were provided with an explanation in regards to the burn, and we believe we've discounted that explanation through our investigation. I
Can you
can't
say
go into
what-
detail.
Oh, you can't say what you think it was. Okay, but what their story was doesn't match up.
No.
Is that kind
Again,
of a common theme?
we did receive an explanation in regards to the burn, but we believe we've discounted that explanation.
How difficult does it make it when you're constantly provided inaccurate information about what went on in that home?
It's very difficult, and that's why these investigations take a long time to resolve. They're very complex investigations, and we have to ensure that we conduct a complete and thorough investigation to the point where we can lay charges.
Does this make it that you're closer, though, to laying charges?
Yeah, we have moved this investigation forward. The new medical evidence that we've received has allowed us to move this investigation forward. We're confident, based on this new medical information, that is the timeline of the injuries, that this case will be resolved.
So if you're confident, is there any reason why no one's been arrested yet?
We have a number of investigative avenues that we have to follow up before we can get to the point where we can lay charges.
You have two suspects. Is it a matter of determining whether both were at fault or one individual was at fault?
That is one of the things that we have to consider, and hopefully will come out during the course of our investigation.
So by providing this update, what do you hope to achieve today?
Well, I think this is a very high-profile investigation. We've had a lot of media inquiries, and with all homicide investigations, again, it's high-profile. We were not able to provide a lot of information in the early stages in the investigation, but we just wanted to provide an update that we are moving this investigation forward and that we believe that we're close to making an arrest.
I have one last question. Can you explain, I don't know if you can or not, but what is it about the blunt force trauma that makes you believe that it wasn't consistent with a fall? Were the injuries just more severe?
Again, I can't go into detail in regards to the injuries to protect the integrity of the investigation.
Any other questions?
When you were talking about the other injuries, can you believe those?
We do have a timeline, and again, that's part of our investigation. And hopefully, the answers to those questions in regards to the other injuries and the timeline will come out during the course of the investigation.
Were these guys ever known to police before?
No, they were not.
And can you say whether the police have been called to that residence before?
I don't believe we had that.
You spoke about the biological father and the stepmother. How about the biological mother? How has she been able to play a factor?
She has been cooperative with the investigation, and during the early stages of the investigation, of course, we kept an open mind and we were looking at all possibilities. But again, she has been cooperative with the investigation throughout and remains so.
And she's not being considered a suspect at all?
No, she is not.
I think you've said that those two had exclusive opportunity.
Yes, again, what we do is we look at who had exclusive opportunity in regards to child death investigations, and we believe that the biological father and the stepmother had exclusive opportunity at the time of these injuries.
So what will happen next?
We will continue with our investigation, and as I stated before, we have a number of investigative steps that we have to follow through with. before we get to the point where we can make an arrest and lay charges.
Over the course of several months, undercover officers developed relationships with Spencer and Marie. Gradually, trust was established. The suspects began to speak more openly. Eventually, during conversations with undercover operatives, they admitted responsibility for what had happened to Meika.
Both Jordan and Magoon confessed to police in an undercover Mr. Big sting operation. The confessions were given to a cop posing as a crime boss. He told Jordan and Magoon they must come clean if they wanted his help.
Fell down the stairs because of me a couple of times, and it was my fault.
I hit her somewhere in the stomach area, and she fell over. I hit her hard. So I guess the best way to put it is I didn't hold back.
In 2012, nearly a year after her death, Spencer Jordan and Marie Magoon were arrested. However, the legal process that followed was not straightforward. In Canadian law, statements obtained during Mr. Big operations are often subject to strict scrutiny. In this case, the court did not accept those confessions as primary evidence. Instead, prosecutors built their case on other elements: medical findings, timeline inconsistencies, patterns of behavior, failure to seek medical care, evidence of ongoing mistreatment. Together, those elements formed a broader picture. A picture that pointed not to a single moment, but to a pattern of harm over time. For Meika's mother, Kyla Jordan, the trial was deeply painful. She sat in court listening to details of what had happened during the final days of her daughter's life. At times, she maintained composure. But outside the courtroom, the weight of what she had heard became overwhelming. In June 2015, the court reached its first major decision. Spencer Jordan and Marie Magoon were found guilty of second-degree murder. Each received a sentence with a minimum of 17 years before parole eligibility. For Kyla and Brian Woodhouse, that sentence did not reflect what they believed had happened. They argued that the actions leading to Meika's death were not impulsive. They were deliberate and prolonged. They chose to continue the legal fight. Appeals were filed. The case returned to higher courts. In November 2017, nearly 6 years after Meika's death, the Alberta Court of Appeal reviewed the case. The court made a rare decision. It overturned the previous classification and concluded that the evidence supported a more severe finding: first-degree murder. That decision was later upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada. The legal process had reached its final point. For Meika's family, it was not closure. Nothing could undo what had happened. But it was recognition. Recognition of the severity of the case. Recognition of what had been taken.
I got an email through my phone that had been sent to both Kyla and I. I just happened to have my phone there with me, and I opened it up and looked over the email from the Crown Prosecutor's office. Basically, within the first sentence or two, telling us that they've decided to file the appeal, pushing for the first-degree murder. And my facial expression and body language gave it away immediately. Kyla knew it was something big and important, but at the same time, I'm trying to read through the rest of the email and get all the information to be able to tell her what's going on. So it was a lot of emotion all in a very, very short period of time. Confused, happy, excited, worried.
Yeah, it's one of those things we weren't expecting anything like this to happen. It was just kind of a surprise. This is kind of where we're going with this, and to get the confirmation of that, I think was, definitely kind of helped settle a little bit to know that, they are pushing to keep going with this, and it wasn't just us that were unsatisfied with the outcome. I mean, when it comes right down to it, regardless of if this appeal goes through or not, second degree is still a conviction. They're still guilty, and they're still going to spend the majority of the rest of their lives behind bars. When it comes to things such as victim impact statements, for example, it's something that we've battled with and gone over and over again in our heads for, since this all started. We're we're going to take our time and go about it the right way and make sure that what we have is not only significant to us, but significant to her as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult process. You know, they tell you that the point of writing out these victim impact statements and being able to read them is that this is the one time where you actually get to face the accused and tell them exactly what this impact has had on your life. And how do you explain an impact like that? It doesn't matter what we stand up there and say. They're not going to ever admit to what they've done. They're not ever going to show any remorse or regret. They're not going to do anything but sit there as stone-faced as they have through every other proceeding. But we've both discussed it in great detail, and this is something we feel we have to do. This is our one chance to be able to look them square in the eyes and tell them exactly what they have done to our family.
You know, it's not what we were hoping for. We pushed for first degree from the beginning. We knew it was going to be a really long, hard road to get to. You know, second degree isn't what we wanted, but ultimately, guilty is guilty. You know, they lose a few years of their life. We lost her.
Whether it was first degree, second degree, regardless, as long as it came down to a guilty verdict, we get our justice for her, and that's what we've been striving for the last almost 4 years now.
Pointing out what exactly each one was responsible for, and to hear the judge, you know, to hear the words being said that this is what you did, and I as a judge find you responsible for that.
Again, when it comes right down to it, guilty is guilty. We got her justice for her, and that's what we're happy for.
It's a life charge. What we get to deal with now is parole eligibilities. So, you know, we will provide our victim impact statements. We will be there for the sentencing date. We will be there for parole hearings. We will be there to push and to see and make sure that they spend every minute behind bars that they possibly can and should.
You know, we're not going to let them ever forget about this. The public is not going to let them forget about it. The people on the inside are not going to let them forget about it. And as long as they spend each and every day knowing what they did, regretting it or not, either way, as long as they can feel that, it's good enough for me.
There were a lot of things I wanted to do. I wanted to yell, I wanted to scream, I wanted to be obscene and go right across that courtroom. At the end of the day, what it boils down to and what my exact sentence and sentiment was that it does not matter the degree that you're charged with. Guilty is guilty, and you're both child murderers.
Today, Meika is remembered not through court documents, but through the life she lived. Her family keeps her belongings, her toys, her notes, small things that carry meaning. Her brother wears a memorial pendant containing a small amount of her ashes and a symbol she loved, a ladybug. They visit her at the Garden of Angels, a place of remembrance. Meika Jordan was 6 years old. She loved to sing, to dance, to play. She believed that even small creatures missed their families. She saw kindness in the world, and she gave it back. Her story is not only about loss, it is also about responsibility. Because in the weeks before her death, there were signs. Reports were made. Concerns were raised. But they were not connected in time. Cases like this leave a question behind, not only for investigators, but for everyone. What happens when warning signs are seen, but not acted on quickly enough? Meika's life was short, but her story continues to matter. Because understanding what happened is part of preventing it from happening again. And sometimes, recognizing a pattern before it is too late is the only chance a child has.